Hello, Sharif here, and welcome to our latest installment of the View Inside the Chrysalis. How we're heading to a new reality, and I'm hoping I'm providing some support in how you think about it, how you act now that you're thinking about it, and where we're going to go together. Okay, so we've got two more segments of the 12 global challenges to go through today. And I'm going to try to run them together because I think they have a bit of common interest and value. But before we do that, I've got my timer all set up here. So I'm going to set our 5 minute meditation timer, and I'm going to invite you to meditate with me if you feel comfortable. As I usually say, you can close your eyes. Obviously, I feel comfortable. Take a deep breath, slow yourself down. Another deep breath. This is your time to connect with all living beings. As you're ready, prepare to come back to center. And as you're ready, let's open our eyes. And for those of you who are like me today, put your other set of eyes on. And let's get started. So, for the past couple of days, we've been going around the 12 Global Challenges circle. A couple of days ago, we started with security, and we've to media and spiritual cultural. And the when Dr. Ariaratne put the 10 village challenges together, media was news. Was getting getting adequate and getting timely news. Now, I'm showing my age now, but news way back in my day was a lot different from what passes for news today. We had back in the days when there were exactly 3 television stations. You picked one of them. Back in those days, most people picked CBS for news because it had the best news and most thoughtful news, and it was led by Walter Cronkite, who was labeled as the most trusted man in America. And well, I trusted him. My mom trusted him, and that's 2 big votes. That if he said something, you're pretty much certain that that this is something that actually happened. If he commented on something, you knew that whatever it was he was commenting on was important. There was a strict line between what's the news and what's entertainment, and there's not even a hint that someone would fabricate news, that would make up news. Okay. Now, in that time, everything's turned on its head. And we now have a situation where not only do you not trust the news, you can trust that you shouldn't trust the news. You know that that in some way we're being spun, in some way we're being lied to, in some way we're being the news is being given to you from a particular slant, from a particular vantage point, a particular interest point. And those interest points have been so um, uh, spread out, so stratified that one group doesn't even know the other group is getting this information. As I've said before, I check about a dozen different news sources in a day, and you may not be able to see this on the camera, but it looks terrible. Okay. AP, Fox, BBC, or Oregon Public Broadcasting, Al Jazeera, NPR, a couple of other sources. And reading again across all of them, you get to see exactly how fractured and how stratified our world is. That we don't, and so here's the important piece. we don't share a common reality anymore. We don't share a common way of looking at the world. And that is that's helping to divide our world. It's helping to divide us in such ways that uh, we don't know how to work together because we don't have a together anymore. Um, Someone has a very long poem, but one part of the poem is the center does not hold. Um, we don't know what the center is. So what happens is that each and every one of us thinks that we are a center. We think that we are the center of the known universe, and all we are is just an opinion. Now, at some point in time, though, you want these opinions to link up, and they don't. And so what we have to do is because we don't have a common viewpoint, we don't have a common consciousness. Now, I have to keep remembering, I have to keep telling you, that's okay. We're not supposed to have that common consciousness anymore. We don't need to resurrect Walter Cronkite to tell us what's going on in the world. What we are doing right now is forming a whole new consciousness and putting that consciousness out in the world and having the consciousness work in such a way that the world starts to work again. I believe fervently that the centerpiece for that world is right here. Yeah, that we're creating a world that works for all living beings. Now, as soon as you say that, you see that every government on the planet, every economic system on the planet is operating in a different way. Makes us kind of outliers, but that can change, and that will change at the drop of a hat. So let's look at what this means regarding our spiritual, cultural um, uh, makeup. There's somewhere around 7,000 languages being spoken on Earth right now, active languages. And the statistic says that 7,000 languages where there are over 50,000 speakers of that language. So people are actively keeping it alive. Now, some of those are multiples. Okay. So when I was in Uganda, I realized that in Uganda, people spoke up to 18 different languages. And everybody knew 6 or 7 different languages. And it was really interesting because when a person met someone else on the street, they had to find the easiest common language between them in order for them to converse. So you start in English, the language of the colonizer. And so you start with hello, how are you, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on which set of languages you've got, you may have to stay there. But you see somebody try blah, 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 and I don't know that one. And so blah, 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 I know a little bit of that one, but not that well. Blah, 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 and then they find one that both sides know reasonably well. Here in the United States, we don't have to do that because we speak English, and most of us don't do that. I was talking to people about being illiterate in more than one language. You don't know how to speak any language. You're making it up. Um, so our challenge, the challenge that we've got, and this gets us into the cultural realm and into the spiritual realm, is our ability to know what reality is, our ability to have a consensus around reality. We don't have it now. This is this is it's one of the things that's so confusing to me that I find it difficult to talk about. This is the first time um, in human history that I know of that we don't even have a consensus of up and down. There are significant numbers of people on this planet that think the planet is flat. Now, somewhere around the third century BC, people said, let's look at our planet. Oh, wow, we're living on a ball. Let's measure the size of the ball. So, somewhere around the third century BC, we figured out what the planet looks like. We figured out that we're spinning, and we figured out that the rough size of this ball that we're on. And they did it using some rather um, interesting phenomena. The direction of the sun going down a well at a particular on a particular day, and measuring the wells 100 miles apart. The sun was going straight down this well and at an angle on this well. Measure the angle, you can measure the circumference of the earth. Okay. We know how to do that stuff. We figured it out before rocket ships, before any of that stuff. So we are smart. We're relatively smart. Okay. We can figure out stuff like that. And now we've got all the tools in the world. We've got rockets that can go, up and take a look at what we've got here. And you've got people who choose not to believe it. I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to develop a technology or a mathematics that will prove that the earth is flat. I'm just going to say it's flat and that's it. And I'm going to choose not to believe anything else. And I can get by on an earth like that. I can get by believing that the earth is flat. I can get by believing that these people over here are inferior to those people over there. I can get by without a common point of view, without having a common point of view. Where that gets us is the goo. It gets us to a point that we don't have the cohesion of a society. All we have is the momentum that got us here. And that momentum is running flat, especially in societies that are experiencing, as I've talked about before, the lying flat movement, I think it's Ping Tang movement in China, where people are giving up on society. I'm going to do the bare minimum that I have to do in order for me to get enough food today, enough water today, and enough roof today, and then I'm going to worry about tomorrow the next day. Some people are doing that from a poverty perspective. Some people are doing that from an affluent perspective. I get my trust fund check every quarter delivered to so and so, and I'm just going to sit around on Bora Bora and surf all day. I'm not going to be part of a society. I'm not going to be relied on for anything. Okay. If we know that those are the enzymes inside of our chrysalis that's dividing, that is separating, and that is dissolving the caterpillar, we are the imaginal cells that will be knitting together the butterfly. So, how are we knitting? And I guess the proper question is, how are you knitting? I'm My way of knitting is every day I wear this button, even though I feel fairly self-conscious about wearing the button. Every day I um, I write on my book, and we are literally inches away from getting this thing to the printer. Um, and I was working through the table of contents last night, so we're really close now. Yeah. By the way, that's the last thing you do. Um, and what I do in every single conversation I have, I talk about what does it mean for us to be creating a world that works for all, creating a world that works for all living beings. Every time someone tries to separate from somebody around me, it's like, wait, those are human beings. I don't care what your wisdom tradition is, but it says that you have a duty of love, respect, and responsibility toward these human beings, you know. And how are we together going to be doing that? Um, and for the past 30 years, maybe 40 if we care to get technical about it, um, I've been doing that with a very, very small handful of people. I've been doing that with people who um, get caught up in the majority stories of the left, the majority stories of the right, the majority stories of the people who don't fit on any spectrum. And I have to, okay, wait a minute, come back around. This is about creating a world that works for all living beings. This becomes our new culture. This becomes our new spirituality. We can have a super culture, and this is what I've said all this before. I'm repeating now because there's new people in the audience. That the um, what I call the Singapore solution, where Singapore had 5 different cultures. I don't remember all of them. I'm not sure I remember all. I know that they included uh, Tamils, Malays, Chinese, Arabs, and another one. Um, and some of these were at odds with each other. Some of these had actually started fighting each other. And they said, we're not going to go this way. Um, Lee Meng Yu said, we're not going to go this way. And we're going to create a superculture. And that superculture we're going to call Singaporean. So it's okay for you to be Arab and to speak Arabic. It's okay for someone to be Malay and someone else to be Chinese and someone else to be Tamil. It's okay. But we are going to create this other culture. And this other culture is Singaporean. And it speaks English. We're going to use the language that could have been oppressive as the thing that catapults us into this higher category. We already have a common language. And when I go to Singapore, it's really easy to get around because all the street signs are in English. And we can celebrate the sub cultures. We can celebrate them as long as we recognize that if we start elevating my separate culture into some other level, we're going to be in trouble. Now, Singapore is one of the richest countries in the world. They're not in trouble. Okay. And we here in the United States are in massive trouble because we keep elevating subcultures into a dominant position. We're not recognizing the thing that keeps us centered, the thing that keeps us flowing. And that's okay. I keep reminding myself because America is not the primary culture. That's not the primary culture. Singapore is not the primary culture. We're creating a whole new culture here. And that culture is Gaian culture. Now, my subculture might be American. My subculture might be African American. My subculture might be Pacific Northwest or Oregonian or whatever you want to call it. But as long as I recognize that the primary culture is Gaian, that we are creating a world, creating a nation, creating an economy, creating a culture that works for all, that works with all. At that point, the notion of I'm going to separate from you and I'm going to have an aircraft carrier that goes out and I'm going to have airplanes and missiles, etc. And I'm going to point it to you because why? Why is it that I want to kill you? Once we recognize that we're all in the same boat, we're all riding on spaceship Earth and we're all going in the same direction, why do I spend so much time trying to separate myself from you? Whatever the problem is that we've got, and we may have lots of problems, but whatever the problem is that we've got, we're going to find a way through it. I was in Nepal some years ago, in Kathmandu. And I know that I'm coming up on the end of my time, but I'm going to buy another 5 minutes here because this, I think, is a very important point. So I was in Nepal, I was in Kathmandu. Kathmandu is a city of 1 million people and has exactly 10 stop signs, 10 stoplights. And those 10 stoplights go from the former palace to the airport. So when the king wanted to go to get on his airplane, they just flicked all the switches, stopped all the traffic. He zips to the airport, turned the lights back off. They don't need them anymore because they don't regulate anything. And everybody is trying to find their way on their own. So you can imagine trying to get across town during rush hour when there are no traffic lights, there's no regulation. Um, and what people do is cooperate. They figure out, first of all, I'm going to seize I'm going to seize the 3 feet in front of me. I'm going to zoom into it. And then I'm going to work with everybody else to try to get this traffic to move for the good of all. Not just get out of my way, but everybody should be able to get home now once I've got my 3 feet. And so you see some real interesting opportunities to cooperate. That kind of cooperation I have seen not just in traffic situations, but I've seen around the world. It's like we want to do that. And what we have to do is support that. Support our, let's just call it Gaian tendency to want to be in a decent relationship with you. Our Gaian relationship at of being answerable to the whole. Our Gaian relationship to how we can work together. Again, since I'm talking about the times of Walter Cronkite, I'm talking about our past here. And I remember people saying, I'm not going to go, my neighbor is not going to go to bed hungry as long as I've got some food to give. I see people doing this all around the world. Even if there's just a little bit of food left on these bones, somebody can benefit from it. And our challenge is, how do we take that energy of altruism, take the energy that is lying right here in our hearts, dormant, and how do we activate it? How do we activate it not just on Sundays, if that's your holy day, or Saturdays, if that's your holy day, or Fridays, or if that's your holy day? How do we activate this all the time? Not just for members of your group, not just for members of your religious group, not just for members of your social group, not just for members of your neighborhood, but for all living beings. How do we do that? The most important thing that you can do is not open your wallets and give me money. You can do that if you want to. I appreciate it. I've got a check right here. Someone said, I like what you're doing, and they sent a check, and it's definitely welcome. So I can continue to live my lavish lifestyle here. But the most important thing that you can do is to hold the energy of creating a world that works for all. Buy yourself a button. No, don't even buy the button. Make your own button. Okay. If you want to buy a button, send me $5 and I'll send you a button. But make your own button. Do this on your own. Make a poster. And in every conversation, start it with your core values. My core value is that I'm creating a world that works for all. I'm doing that because I believe in the notion of inclusivity, that we are one. It's amazing how I hear people in every religious group who will quote from their holy book where it says, "We are one. You have to love your neighbors. You have to love your enemies. You have a duty to the earth." And the next words out of their mouth negate that. Not those people over there. We have to be at war with them because they're trying to take our something or another. So, what we are doing, and this is the culmination point of the spiritual cultural circle, is creating a new spirituality. Now, yours can be based in Christian teachings. It can be based in Buddhist teachings. I was just watching. The Buddha has a new. The Dalai Lama has a new video on YouTube that I thought was interesting. I was watching it last night, and yeah, it can be based on Buddhism, it can be based on Christianity, it can be based on Islam, etc. But you have to take it further. You can call this super Christianity or super Islam or super Judaism, but it has to be applied not just for people in your group, but it has to be applied for every other human being and for every other living being. Okay, I'm going to pause here and declare our 12 global challenges done. So on Monday, we're going to start in looking at what are the elements inside of yourself that may be keeping us from knitting our human lives together. You've heard me talk about what happens when the ground starts shaking in an earthquake. Immediately, people move into protecting their own bodies and then protecting all others. People don't go into, well, I'm okay, my family's okay, screw everybody else. Okay, I hope somebody gets in here and cleans this mess up. But as long as I'm okay and the members of my family that I like are okay, everybody else can go hang. So we don't do that. We act the way that we can act every single day of the week. And our challenges is, how do we create networks? How do we create systems? How do we create structures? How do we create a nation, a global nation that does that all the time? We can do it. I just said it, so we can do it. We probably have to change our focus from trying to escape this world, trying to get to Mars as though that's better, and start looking at how do we preserve it and how do we activate the human spirit? How do we get to the point that all of us are pulling in the same direction? I obviously think it's possible, since I've been doing this for as long as I've been doing it. It's going to be a lot more possible with you pulling too. So, looking forward to all of us pulling together. Looking forward to talking to you on Monday. May all beings be well. May all beings be secure. May all beings be happy. I want you to have a good weekend. Think about some of the stuff I've been talking about, and let's see where we go on Monday.